G'day there guys, Marky here, and welcome back to another episode of r/relationship advice. Thank you for tuning in. I do hope you're having a fantastic day. Now with that said, I want you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn of the Barbie, and let's get right into it. Posted by user Throwaway Baby Name, titled, Am I the asshole for breaking my fiance's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? So myself, 25 female, and my fiance, 27 male, have a 2-month-old son. We are overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision that we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name. Let's say it's Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they're very serious about it. My fiance's eldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first of his generation, and consequently should get the name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and would have been okay with naming my son that, but unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked the family not to name any of our future children Peter during her lifetime. My mother-in-law and father-in-law knew about this promise, and at first seemed to only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of the one that we chose. However, my grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral. On our last days there, my in-laws called to offer me their condolences. Then my mother-in-law asked if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name that we chose was awful, and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they had only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake, and had no obligation to keep it now that she had passed. My family agrees that while it's true we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use. My fiancé agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last weeks of my pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born, and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of them hadn't previously wanted to name their sons Peter, but did it anyway for the family's sake. They said our decision was selfish, and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not. It just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and uncle's memories to even consider using the name. My father-in-law offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiance's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiance and his family. He assures me he's fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. Am I the asshole? Edit. The tradition started, as far as I know, when OG Peter died, and his son, also named Peter, named his firstborn after his father. Peter III ended up having the first son of the following generation, and did the same thing. That one died before having children, so his sister gave the name to her son, and so on. The name Peter is very common in my country, so none of them ever got bullied over it, and the fact that it was also my uncle's name isn't as unlikely as one might think. Also, middle names aren't used in my country. Most people get the maternal surname before the paternal one instead. Honestly, I'm going to give you a not the asshole for this one, especially given that your uncle died a tragic, horrible death, and you're going to be reminded of that every time you look at this son's name. It is your child and your choice. We're not going to give in to the peer pressure of dead people just because the family wants that. Like, damn, sorry that you value your family tradition so much, but you can just name your son Peter instead and just forget about our one. This one doesn't exist, it doesn't count in the line of succession, don't worry. Also, the fact that they said you should just be over the death of your grandmother by now. That's an asshole thing to say, I'm sorry. Not the asshole OP. In the comments, Rich Signal 7022 says, Not the asshole. After 7 generations, I think it's time that their family moved on. OP replies, I've always been surprised it even lasted that long. And like, no offense, but that's a pretty vague tradition. Like, how do they keep track of each new generation to determine this? I have cousins 15 years older than me and 15 years younger. My husband has cousins 25 years younger than him. At some point, this has got to get more confusing than it's worth, right? OP says, generation basically means line of cousins to them. I only kind of get it, but I think basically every time a cousin has a child, he or she is the first of the generation. My maternal family kinda works like that too. I'm 20 years older than one of my youngest cousins, but we're still from the same generation. His uncle, while only 4 years older than me, is from my mom's. Sorry, I'm really bad at explaining this. Not the asshole. Family name traditions are weird, and you can do whatever you want and name your baby whatever you want. Keep pushing the "I'm honoring my late grandmother's final wishes" hard, so they see how unhinged they sound asking you to flout that. And as a grandma, the idea of rejecting a child based on a name is simply trifling. It's downright shallow, petty, and a real ugly representation of one's integrity. Honestly, the longer these people avoided my child, the less their value would be worth in my child's life. Who would want such people around after a while? What would they bring to the table for my child? How would people like this positively enrich his or her development? I feel bad for OP's partner, as this behavior surely has hurt him. Otherwise, I would consider this behavior a possibly important reveal to who these people are and what kind of chaos they could be capable of. Update. Thank you so much to everyone who commented and offered support. A lot has happened since I posted, so I thought I'd give you an update. About a week after my post, my fiance's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior and begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical but invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiancé and his parents. One day, my fiancé was helping my father-in-law with something at our place, so my mother-in-law and I went to the park with my baby. Sometime later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, she was sitting on a park bench, chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as son's name's Mom, and she said, "Oh, I thought his name was Peter." I didn't say a word, and neither did my mother-in-law. She followed me to the car, and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiancé about what had happened. The moment we got there, he kicked both of his parents out of our place. He had read my texts and confronted his father. Thankfully, my father-in-law is a terrible liar and confessed immediately. Apparently, both my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on the few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think that they are in the right. We are heartbroken, especially my fiancé, not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to the both of us. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. I was raised in a different city than all of my grandparents, and always wished that they could have been more involved in my life. Losing my grandmother didn't help. Pretty much every doubt I had only existed because I thought that it would be important for my son to grow up with all of his grandparents around. But now, all of my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they don't deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson, because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their asses. Edit, I thought I'd clarify some things. First of all, I'm not comfortable sharing my son's name here, but I promised it's not a unique name or anything like that. It's perfectly normal and popular-ish in our country. Secondly, I mentioned this in the comments, but while my family didn't try to dictate me on my son's name, they would never be comfortable with it. My Uncle Peter passed almost 3 decades ago, but it forever changed everyone who knew him. My grandmother's wish might seem a bit irrational, but it was motivated entirely by grief, and it didn't seem right to disrespect that just because she's not around anymore. And to whoever PM'd me that my fiancé's only on my side to keep the peace, he didn't want to use that name either. Months before I got pregnant, he told me he hoped one of his cousins would have a son before we did because he always hated the tradition and sympathized with my family. He's just as angry at his parents as I am, if not more. Also, most of his cousins and some other relatives have come around and apologized. In the comments, are they this unhinged in other areas of your life too? OP says, according to my fiance, they've always been a little bit entitled, but I never really saw them enough to be able to say that. I will say that, though they were polite, they very clearly didn't care about me until we moved in together. My mother-in-law pretended not to remember my name every time she saw me, and my father-in-law would lose interest in any conversations that weren't about him. Once it was clear that me and my fiance were in for the long term, they started acting a lot more friendly towards me, but it never seemed sincere. Have other family members come around yet? OP says, most of my fiance's cousins have come around, and his brother was always on our side. His grandmother and some of his aunts and uncles are with us too. His grandfather, divorced from his grandmother, 2 out of 3 living Peters, the 2 oldest, and pretty much everyone else are either still mad at us or haven't reached out to talk about it yet. My entire family is on my side. They promised to not interfere in the naming process, but are relieved that we didn't name him Peter. One more note on the $1,000 offered in the first post. And that's $1,000 in my country's currency. It roughly translates to $200 US. Note, OP clarifies in a comment that she is Brazilian. OP drops this horrible bombshell about her uncle, the one who died before she was born. My uncle was murdered. My grandmother's request was motivated by trauma. Again, my family would be mostly fine with naming my son Peter. My dad and my aunt might have been uncomfortable, and my grandmother asked us all not to do so. But I wouldn't have been disowned if I had. It simply felt disrespectful, especially since my grandmother passed shortly before my son was born. My uncle's death was traumatic for my family, but the name Peter is hugely common in my country. And now, onto the latest update, titled, My in-laws started harassing me for destroying their family naming tradition. My son is now 5 months old, almost 6. We're still no contact with my fiance's parents, who haven't seen us since May. We've both blocked them everywhere. His relatives who were on our side still are, and most of the ones who weren't haven't come around. If anything, they're even more pissed now. I remember someone suggesting that my fiance's family might stop using the name after we decided not to. Well, you were right. Last week, one of my fiance's cousins announced that she was pregnant with a boy. She included her baby's name in the announcement, and it's not Peter. What followed was a string of aggressive Instagram DMs from both mother-in-law and father-in-law. They both created accounts for the sole purpose of contacting me. I didn't see them until 2 days later. They sent me almost an hour worth of voice messages about how I'd ruined their family. They wished their son had never met me, that he'd seen me for who I truly am, and that I'd never gotten pregnant. Many of the messages ended with, "I hope you're happy now," as if they thought that they were getting the last word, only to think of something else that they wanted to say. There was name-calling, an accusation of me cheating, and the persistent refusal to refer to my son as their grandchild. My fiancé and I listened to the messages together. He hadn't gotten any. As much as I tried to distance myself, I was in tears by the time that it was all done. I still don't regret anything, especially after the stunt they pulled back in May, but I'm not completely free of the guilt yet, not to mention their complete disregard for their grandson. I was already having an overwhelming week, and this just seemed like the final straw. I must have spent close to an hour sobbing in my fiancé's arms. Once I was calmer, he unblocked his parents just to scream at them for a while. I only heard his side of the conversation, but it was more than enough. He finished the call by saying he didn't want to hear from them again. We had a long talk afterwards. My fiancé opened up about the emotional blackmail by his family before and after my pregnancy. My in-laws were close to threatening him with anything they could if we didn't name our son Peter. I told him about my guilt and how awful I feel for putting him through this. We reassured each other, cried a bit more, and had a mostly pleasant evening with our baby. We contacted his cousin. The family is giving her shit for breaking the tradition again. They are being way less aggressive though, and I think many of my in-laws are finally learning to let go. We are not expecting any apologies anytime soon, but we will be glad if they come. Our wedding will be in September 2024, and whoever doesn't give us a sincere apology until then is uninvited. My fiancé's parents are banned either way. We came to that decision together. Also, I'd like to address some comments on my previous update about how I was letting my family's trauma win, or how the name wouldn't be hurtful now that my grandmother is passed. I can't stress enough the damage my uncle's death caused. He was only 30 years old. He had a fiancée, a great career, and his whole life ahead of him. I don't know many details about what happened because I didn't want to upset my family by asking. My grandmother wasn't the only person hurt by this. My entire paternal family was. And if I remembered correctly, the person responsible isn't even in jail anymore. It was more than 20 years ago, but the wound never truly closed. So yeah, I think it's safe to say the tradition is over. The next Not Peter will be here in January, right before my son's first birthday. It was never my intention for this to turn into such a shitstorm, but I'm so incredibly proud of my little family. Thank you so much for everyone who shared their stories and offered advice during these last few months. I'll be forever grateful for all the support that I got from y'all. In the comments, Dan Horace says, I hope you're happy now. Lamau? I bet she is. They could not have made it easier for her to win than with those awful messages. In the end, Opie got her name, their grandson, their son, and topped it off with one of their nieces and her son too. I hope she lives rent-free in their heads for the rest of their miserable lives. I would just reply, I am. Thank you, smiley face. Why does the mother-in-law even care? She married into the family. Maybe she's one of those mentioned in the first post who were pissed because they didn't want to name their kids Peter either, but still did it. I don't understand why people like OP's in-laws let tradition rule their life. I'm so glad her fiancé is on her side and is supporting her. Ah, the rule we all followed. If you don't follow it too, what even is life? Ah, it's too much, I'm falling into the abyss. Yeah, it very quickly stopped being about the name Peter and started being a pissing contest when their family tradition had to win over another family's trauma. Now it's just an exercise in attempted control and boundary stomping to try to make an example of what happens to youngins who don't follow the matriarch and patriarch's dictates, large or small. Well, I don't expect a new update to come from that one unless there is a new murder that's happened in the family over this name. Jesus, can you imagine that? I am quite glad that we got a final wrapping up of this story though. It's nice to see people finally breaking free from stupid constraints that elders in families will just put on others in situations like this. I feel like from reading these stories, it's not all that common that we see people deviating from that. More often than not, they choose to not rock the boat and just side with the oppressors, like the mother-in-law and father-in-law in this instance, so that they don't get the same treatment. Anyway, all that to say that I'm pretty glad that it ended this way. But what about you guys? I'd love to know down in the comments below. Our next post is by user WeirdAttention6183, titled, Am I the asshole for refusing to meet my boyfriend's friends unless they apologize to me? A couple of weeks ago, my 24 female, boyfriend's 27 male friends found a Tinder account with my pictures on it and matched with it. I have not met with my boyfriend's friends yet, but they know what I look like because my boyfriend showed them pictures. They showed my boyfriend the account, and my boyfriend called me immediately to tell me about it. I haven't used Tinder in over a year, and Tinder is supposed to delete inactive accounts after 7 days, so I knew that it wasn't mine. His friend also messaged with the account that weekend, but I was with my boyfriend watching a movie at that exact time, so my boyfriend didn't really believe the account was mine either. But his friends weren't convinced that I wasn't cheating. I could hear them yelling things through the phone like, make that beer prove herself, your girlfriend is a whore, along with other really degrading names. My boyfriend told them to shut up as I was on the verge of tears. I went on FaceTime with all of them while the friends messaged the account. They made me show my hands and my phone on the video call the whole time. The catfisher messaged back, and I was proven innocent. None of them apologized to me. They only apologized to my boyfriend, which felt even more disrespectful. Apparently those friends are hosting a party this weekend, and my boyfriend wants me to meet the group for the first time, but I don't want anything to do with them until they apologize to me for calling me names. My boyfriend understands, but also says that it would mean a lot if I could at least give his friends another chance, since they were actually just doing their best to support him since he had been cheated on in the past. Would I be the asshole if I refused? Honestly, no. These people have been nothing but assholes to you. Why do you owe them anything, and why should you turn up to this party? None of them have apologized either. You're just walking into that situation with bad blood from the get-go. How is you being there in person going to make anything better for them? How is that going to calm this situation when none of them have reached out to be like, I was wrong. You know what? You're a great person. I was just protecting my friend. You know how it is, but I made a mistake. We all as a group made a mistake and we're so sorry for that. We would love for you to come to the party so that we can be friends and show that we don't actually hold bad blood. We were just crazy. We just had a moment of craziness, hot girl crazy. Yet, surprisingly, none of them did that. Interesting. I don't know what this is supposed to hint at, but they have no remorse for their actions, and they're just gonna sweep this under the rug. That's not okay. That makes them assholes. And OP, you were not the asshole. In the comments, Tess178 says, not the asshole. Why does your boyfriend have such disgusting friends? That's concerning. Sounds like a really uncomfortable situation you'd be entering into. You have to decide if you want to give them a chance to apologize in person or stand your ground and only go if they apologize first. But that might cause issues too if they see you as a problem. Let me be clear. They are most definitely massive assholes. But if you want to stay with your boyfriend and keep the peace, you gotta figure out what you're comfortable with. And no matter what, they owe you that apology the next time they see you, and your boyfriend needs to put them in line. For real, WTF? Time to dump the boyfriend and his buddies. Not the asshole, but you're the asshole to yourself if you stay and continue to put up with these misogynistic, degrading tests of loyalty. It's probably the original friend that found the account and gassed everyone else up. Jealous ex or friend. Info. Have you considered that one of them made the account? Their gleeful gang-up is suspicious to me. OP replies, I don't know about that, but I don't want to point fingers without any real evidence. I think they're just misogynistic in an all women are snakes kind of way. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true that birds of a feather flock together. If they believe those things, then so does he. Normal people would be too disgusted by their behavior to be their friend. Not the asshole, stand your ground. You humored them and went so far to prove that you were innocent, the least they can do is apologize. Red flag that your boyfriend doesn't think that they owe you an apology. But does a demanded apology even mean anything? It wouldn't to me. I wouldn't get over this. It doesn't mean jack from the friends, but it would mean a hell of a lot if the boyfriend stood up for his girlfriend against those guys, wouldn't it? If my friends did that to my girlfriend, they are no longer my friends. I understand being worried your friends may be getting cheated on, but instantly jumping to conclusions and then not apologizing afterwards? They're bad friends. And all the name calling. That's just straight up uncalled for. If my friend spoke to my girlfriend, or pretty much any woman like that, I would not be friends with them. Yeah, they were being bros by sending him info about the account, but the name calling swings the wheel entirely into awful people territory. Update. So much crazy shit has happened, and I've just been trying to process it all. I don't even think that y'all are going to believe what went down. After reading through the comments on my last post, I told my boyfriend again that I was not going to the party because I felt disrespected by his friends and disappointed that he did nothing to stand up for me. My boyfriend apologized to me and made it up to me by spending the weekend with me at my place instead of going to the party. He told me that after he quits his job, he would go no contact with any of his friends who refused to apologize to me. None of them did. His apology seemed genuine, and him not going to the party convinced me that everything was good, so I didn't break up with him. Flash forward to a few days ago, my boyfriend and I were laying together in bed. He was on his phone, messaging some of his friends while I was watching TikToks. At one point, I glanced at his phone while he was scrolling through his texts and saw that he had sent a bunch of screenshots of my pictures from Instagram to someone. Even from far away, I could tell that they were pictures of me. I didn't think much of it and thought, aw, he's showing his friends what I look like. I was so dumb. So before we went to sleep, I jokingly asked him, hey, why were you sending my Instagram pictures to your friends? He went white and there was so much panic on his face. I immediately knew something was up and made him explain. Apparently he sent my Instagram pictures to his friends so that they could make a fake Tinder account to see if I was really cheating on him. Because he had been cheated on in the past, he felt so insecure in our relationship that he wanted to make sure I didn't have any dating apps or was doing anything shady behind his back. He thought the confrontation would scare me into a real confession. But he didn't want to seem like a bad guy with major trust issues, which is what he is. So he had his friends confront me for him while he pretended to be on my side the whole time. They saw my reaction to it all. I was literally on the verge of tears the entire call and did not confess to anything they accused me of, and they decided to play it off as a catfish. So congrats to those of you in the comments who guessed right. The friends made the fake account. I didn't believe it at first because I had no evidence and I hate making false assumptions about people. Ironic, isn't it? I also thought that they had no way to get the pictures of me since my Instagram is private, but how the hell was I supposed to know that my own boyfriend was providing them to frame me? Needless to say, I dumped his ass. He cried the whole time, which was admittedly satisfying to watch, but also painful. Thanks for all the support. Wish me luck in therapy. In the comments, Similar Shame 7517 says, I really can't fathom what these people who like to test their partners and friends and family members think. Only a complete doormat would be relieved to find out that, oh, you've set up that incident that traumatized me just so you could be sure I'm a good person. Understandable. Have a good day. Anyone who goes through with testing their partner like this isn't emotionally mature enough to be in a relationship. Oh wow, the friend group and the boyfriend are absolute man-children and idiots. 27-year-old people playing these kinds of games is a low bar. I feel bad for OP having to surround herself with a bunch of idiots. I hope for the best for her. Why do people who need therapy, like the man-child here, not get therapy? Well, sadly, even if these men do seek out therapy, it won't work. For therapy to be successful, you have to want to change and be willing to put in the work to change. Plus, it requires cultivating self-reflection, empathy, and integrity, all of which these men utterly lack. Always ending these stories with absolute bangers. But yeah, it doesn't seem as though he wants to go to therapy, and it doesn't seem as though that boyfriend wants help right now. I don't think he's willing to change, and I don't think he's willing to put in the work. Given his actions, it is very clear that he just wants to continue the status quo and shift blame. That's just not someone ready for a committed relationship. I'm sorry, he should stay single for a while and fix himself. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave you guys for today. I do hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.